still remember the exact weight of the silver dollar in my palm the night I walked through those swinging doors. It was cold, heavy, minted in Carson City just 3 months prior, and it represented the last of what I owned in this world. Nevada in 1874 was a place where men came to forget who they were, and I was no exception. The Comstock Lode had turned Virginia City into a fever dream of wealth and desperation, a raw wound carved into the side of Mount Davidson, where fortunes were made in the dark belly of the earth and lost just as quickly under the flicker of oil lamps in poorly lit gambling halls and brothels that never closed. The town had grown from nothing to 15,000 souls in less than a decade, a monument to human greed and ambition, built on silver veins that ran deeper than any man had dreamed possible. I had been a poker player for 7 years by then, drifting from Sacramento to Carson City, from Reno to the nameless camps that sprouted like weeds along the eastern slopes of the Sierra Nevada. I was good with cards, better with reading faces, with knowing when a man was bluffing and when he had the hand that would break you. But luck is a cruel mistress in the desert, and by that autumn, I found myself $30 in debt to a man named Caleb Drum, a claim owner with a reputation for collecting what he was owed in blood if silver failed him. Drum was not a large man, but he had eyes like a snake and a voice that could cut through the noise of 100 miners drinking away their wages. He had given me until Sunday to pay, and it was already Thursday night. It was in the Silver Spur that I first heard about the place. I was sitting at a corner table, nursing a whiskey that tasted like kerosene mixed with saddle leather, watching the miners come and go with their pockets full of silver and their eyes full of that desperate hunger that the Comstock put in every man who worked her tunnels. The air was thick with tobacco smoke and the smell of unwashed bodies, and somewhere in the back a piano player was murdering a Stephen Foster tune with more enthusiasm than skill. That was when the old prospector sat down across from me without asking. He had one milky eye, the other sharp as broken glass, and his hands shook when he reached for the bottle I had not offered to share. He drank straight from it, wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, and leaned close enough that I could smell the rot in his teeth. "You looking for a way to change your luck?" he asked, and I laughed because every man in Virginia City was looking for the same thing, but he did not laugh. He stared at me with that one good eye and told me about a saloon on the edge of town that only opened its doors at midnight. He said it with the kind of gravity that made my skin prickle, his voice dropping to a whisper that I had to strain to hear over the noise of the bar. "They play for real stakes there," he said. "Silver, gold, claims, souls, whatever a man is willing to bet." I asked him what he meant by souls, and he just smiled, showing me those rotten teeth, and said, "You go there, boy. You better make sure you're still breathing when the clock strikes 1. Then he grabbed my wrist with a grip that felt like iron wrapped in leather and bone, and he pulled up his sleeve. His forearm was covered in scars, old burns that had healed badly, but among them was a mark I recognized. A silver dollar burned into the flesh just below his elbow, the edges raised and white like a brand. "I went there once," he said, "only once, and I got out, but it follows you. It never lets go." Then he released me, finished the bottle, and walked out into the dust and darkness without another word. I sat there for a long time after he left, staring at the place on my wrist where his fingers had been, feeling the phantom weight of that grip. I should have left it alone. Any man with sense would have, but desperation makes fools of us all, and Caleb Drum had made it clear that if I did not have his money by Sunday, he would take payment in ways I did not care to imagine. Men had disappeared before when they owed Drum money, their bodies found weeks later in the desert, picked clean by coyotes and vultures. So I asked around, quiet-like, buying drinks for men who might know something, dropping coins that I could not afford to lose. The responses I got were always the same: silence, averted eyes, a shake of the head. It was like asking about a grave everyone knew existed, but no one wanted to visit. Finally, a barkeep named Thomas, a half-Shoshone man with gray streaking his black hair, told me where it was. He did not use its name at first, only pointed west toward the far end of C Street, where the buildings thinned out and the desert took over. It is called the Pale Horse, he said, his voice flat and empty. You will know it when you see it. The doors open at midnight and close at 1, no earlier, no later, and if you value your soul, you will turn back before you reach them. I thanked him and left a silver coin on the bar. He stared at it for a long moment, then pushed it back toward me. Keep it, he said. You are going to need it more than I do. The night I went, the sky was clear and hard as black glass, the stars sharp enough to cut, scattered across the darkness like broken pieces of ice. The temperature had dropped with the sun, and my breath came out in thin clouds as I walked past the last of the respectable establishments, past the well-lit saloons where honest men drank and whores worked the rooms upstairs, and into the stretch of land where the town gave way to sagebrush, scorpions, and silence. I could hear the distant thump of stamp mills working the ore, that rhythmic pounding that sounded like a giant heartbeat buried deep in the earth, never stopping, never resting. The buildings here were crooked, half-finished, their wooden frames bleached gray by wind and time, their windows dark and empty like the eye sockets of skulls. And then I saw it. The Pale Horse sat at the end of a narrow alley between two abandoned structures, its facade painted a color I can only describe as the white of old bone left too long in the sun, bleached and dead. The paint was peeling, curling away from the wood like dead skin, and underneath it the boards were black with age and rot. There were no windows, only two swinging doors that looked as though they had not moved in years, their hinges crusted with rust. Above the entrance, a sign creaked in the wind, the words barely visible in the moonlight, the paint so faded that I had to squint to read them, "The Pale Horse," and underneath, in smaller letters, "No living allowed after midnight." I stopped 20 feet away and checked my pocket watch. It was 11:58. My heart was beating too fast, slamming against my ribs like it wanted to break free, and my mouth was dry despite the flask of whiskey I had emptied on the walk over. I told myself I would just look inside, see what the fuss was about. Maybe find a game with higher stakes and players foolish enough to lose. I told myself I would win enough to pay Drum and have money left over, enough to leave Virginia City and never come back. I told myself a lot of things that night. None of them were true. At exactly midnight, I heard the sound. It was not loud. It was barely a whisper, but it was unmistakable. The door swung open, slow and smooth, as if pushed by hands I could not see, and warm light spilled out into the alley, orange and gold, the kind of light that comes from oil lamps and candles, and with it came the smell: tobacco, whiskey, sweat, leather, blood, all of it familiar, the smell of every saloon I had ever entered. But underneath it was something else, something rotten and sweet, like flowers left too long on a grave, like meat going bad in the summer heat. I should have run. Every instinct I had, every lesson the desert had taught me about survival, screamed at me to turn around, to go back to my rented room above the laundry and find another way to pay Caleb Drum. But I did not. I stepped forward. I walked through those doors. The inside of the Pale Horse was larger than it should have been. The walls stretched back farther than the building's exterior would allow, disappearing into shadows that no amount of lamplight could penetrate, and the ceiling was lost in darkness despite the dozens of lamps that burned on every table, their flames steady and unmoving in air that should have made them flicker. The bar ran the length of the left side, polished wood dark as dried blood, smooth as glass, and behind it stood a bartender in a crisp white shirt and black vest, his face pale as chalk, his expression blank as a death mask. There were maybe 20 people inside, all of them seated at tables, all of them playing cards or drinking in absolute silence. No laughter, no conversation, no sound except the soft whisper of cards being dealt and the clink of coins on wood. No one looked up when I entered. No one acknowledged me at all. The air was thick, humid in a way that made no sense for the Nevada desert, and it carried a weight that pressed against my chest like a cold hand, making it hard to breathe, hard to think. I walked to the bar, my boots loud on the wooden floor, each step echoing in that unnatural silence, and the bartender turned to face me with movements that were too precise, too controlled, like a puppet on strings. His eyes were the color of ash, gray and lifeless, and when he spoke, his voice had no warmth in it, no humanity. "What will you have?" I ordered whiskey, and he poured it without a word, sliding the glass across the bar with fingers that were too long, too white, the nails darker than they should have been, almost black at the tips. I drank it in one swallow, hoping it would steady my nerves, but it tasted like nothing. No burn, no bite, just cold liquid that might as well have been water. I set the glass down and asked if there was a game I could join. He stared at me for a long moment, his expression never changing, then nodded toward a table in the back corner, where 4 men sat beneath a lamp that burned with a strange blue-green flame, like foxfire in a swamp. I approached slowly, taking in the details as I walked. The men at the other tables were still, too still, their movements mechanical and stiff when they reached for cards or lifted their drinks. Their faces were waxy, the color of tallow, and their eyes were dull, filmed over like the eyes of dead fish, and none of them blinked, not once. I watched a man at the nearest table for a full minute, and he did not blink, did not breathe, just sat there with his cards in his hand and his drink untouched. I told myself it was the light, the smoke, the whiskey in my blood playing tricks on me, but I knew, somewhere deep in the part of me that still remembered how to feel fear, I knew. When I reached the table in the corner, one of the men gestured to an empty chair with a hand that was missing 2 fingers. I sat. The man across from me smiled, and his teeth were too yellow, his gums too gray, receded so far I could see the roots. He dealt the cards with hands that trembled slightly, and I noticed the dirt under his fingernails, thick and black, the kind of dirt that does not come from a day's work, but from something older, something final, the dirt of the grave. We played in silence. 5-card draw. The stakes were high, silver dollars and gold coins piled in the center of the table, glinting in that sickly blue-green light. I won the first hand, I won the second. By the third, I realized that none of the men were trying to win. They were just going through the motions, their faces blank, their bets automatic, as if they were following some script written long ago. I looked around the room again, and this time I saw it, really saw it. The man at the table nearest the door had a hole in his chest, a dark stain spreading across his shirt, the edges of the wound ragged and old, crusted with dried blood. The woman 2 tables over had a rope burn around her neck, deep and purple, her head tilted at an unnatural angle. The bartender's wrists, now that I looked closely in the lamplight, were slashed from palm to elbow, the scars white and puckered, the kind of scars that come from a razor drawn deep. They were all dead. Every single person in that saloon was dead, and they had been dead for a long time. I stood so fast the chair fell backward, the crack of wood on wood echoing through the room like a gunshot. Every head turned toward me in perfect synchronization, every pair of eyes dead and glassy and wrong, fixed on me with an intensity that froze the breath in my lungs. The man across from me, the one with the yellow teeth and gray gums, spoke for the first time. His voice was dry, cracked, like wind over stone, like the sound of a corpse trying to remember how to talk. Sit down. The game is not finished. I shook my head, backing away, my hand reaching for the revolver at my hip that I had not brought, that I had left in my room, because I thought I was just going to play cards with desperate miners, not with the dead. He stood, and the others stood with him, their movements synchronized, unnatural, joints cracking like dry wood. I saw now that their skin was the wrong color, too pale, too gray, the texture of meat left too long in the sun, beginning to spoil. Their eyes were sunken, their lips cracked, and when they moved toward me, I could hear it, the wet sound of decay, the soft whisper of rot. "You came here," the man said, taking a step closer. "You walked through the doors. You sat at the table. You played the game. Now you stay. Now you are one of us." I ran. I ran for the door, my boots slipping on the floor, my breath coming in ragged gasps, my heart hammering so hard I thought it would burst. Behind me I could hear them, not running but walking, slow and deliberate, their footsteps like the ticking of a clock, counting down to midnight, to the moment when the doors would close and I would be trapped inside with them forever. I hit the swinging doors hard, bursting out into the night, and the cold air hit me like a fist, clean and sharp after the thick rot of the saloon. I did not stop. I ran down the alley, past the gray buildings, past the stamp mills that pounded and pounded like the heartbeat of something that should have died long ago. I ran back into the heart of Virginia City where the lights were still burning and the living still walked the streets, where the sound of pianos and laughter meant that the world was still real, still alive. I ran until my lungs burned and my legs gave out, collapsing against the side of a building, vomiting into the dust, my whole body shaking. When I finally looked up, the sky was beginning to lighten, the stars fading into the pale wash of dawn. I checked my pocket watch with hands that would not stop trembling. It was 6 in the morning. I had been inside the pale horse for 6 hours, though it had felt like minutes, like no time at all. And when I looked down at my left palm, I saw something that made my blood turn to ice, burned into the flesh. The edges raised and white like a brand was the outline of a silver dollar, perfect, permanent, a mark that would never fade. I left Virginia City that morning. I did not collect my things. I did not say goodbye to anyone. I walked to the train station and bought a ticket east with the last of my money, and I have never returned to Nevada. I paid Caleb Drum eventually, though it took me 2 years of hard work in a Chicago meatpacking plant, cutting throats and bleeding hogs 16 hours a day until my hands were as scarred as my soul. But the mark on my palm never left, and sometimes, late at night, when the world is quiet and I am alone in the dark, I can still smell it. Tobacco, whiskey, sweat, leather, blood, and underneath it all, that sweet, rotting smell of flowers on a grave. I do not know what the pale horse was. I do not know if it was a door to some other place, some purgatory for those who died with unfinished business, or if it was something older, something that has always existed in the spaces between the living and the dead, feeding on the desperate and the damned. What I do know is that I was not supposed to be there. I was not invited. I was not dead. And the fact that I walked out at all is something I will never understand. Something that wakes me up in the middle of the night with my heart racing and my sheets soaked with sweat. But I carry the proof of that night with me always, burned into my skin, a reminder that some doors should never be opened, some games should never be played, and some frontiers were never meant to be crossed. They say Virginia City is a ghost town now. Most of the silver gone. Most of the people moved on to other dreams, other failures. The mines are flooded, the mansions empty, the streets silent. I wonder sometimes if the pale horse is still there, still opening its doors at midnight, still waiting for the living foolish enough to walk inside. I wonder if the man with the yellow teeth is still dealing cards, if the bartender with the slashed wrists is still pouring drinks that taste like nothing. I wonder if they remember me, the living man who sat at their table and played their game and walked away. I wonder if they are waiting for me to come back, but I will not. I have seen what waits on the other side of that threshold, and I know now that death is not the end. It is just another room, another game, another long night that never ends. And I would rather live every day with this mark on my hand, with this weight in my chest, with the memories that haunt me, than spend eternity in that place where the dead play cards and the whiskey has no taste, and the doors only open at midnight for those foolish enough to cross them. Some frontiers were never meant to be crossed. I learned that in 1874, in a saloon that should not exist, in a town built on silver and blood and broken dreams. And I will carry that lesson with me until the day I die, and maybe even after, because I know now that the dead do not rest. They wait, they play, they deal their cards in the darkness, and they are always, always looking for new players.